Welcome to my sign painting class, and I'm very happy to have you guys here today. So this is the first of my videos, so bear with me. We'll be going through all the instructions and all the materials that you will need to complete your sign painting project. So my company is Dabble Diva, and I have just started with these kits, and my goal is to have the kit so that you can have pretty much everything that you need to complete it on your own. And along with my instructional video, you should be able to create a most beautiful project. So first of all, I do have some different designs that are available, of course, and you can get some custom ones made. If you're looking at having a group of people for an activity or a party, reunion, whatever the case may be, I can make up some signs for you as well. And you can specify the size you want. So when you get a kit, what you're going to get is you're going to get your pine board. This is solid pine. And then you're going to get a pre-cut stencil. Now, typically the stencils come like this, where you do not have the white part, because that is where I weeded out the stencil, the blue part. So typically you would get it like this, and then you would do the weeding on your own. And I will show that today. But just for my first few, because I was doing some testing and wanted to make sure that my Cricut was cutting them thoroughly and everything was going well, I have weeded the first bits of my kits that I'm sending out. Now there is a bit of a difference between these two. This one has what's called the transfer tape, and I'll talk more about that later. And that is right here underneath the stencil. It's got little red lines on it. Now with this one, because there was some little parts of the E and so on that were coming off easily, I decided to make it easier for this person. So I put this transfer film right on top. So you can see those little red marker lines there. So they're the same process. It's just this one has sort of skipped a step where I've done the stencil, the film application for you. So we're just going to set these two aside, and we're going to take a look at what actually comes in your kits. So first of all, there will be a pine board. Now all of my pine boards are pre-sanded. Most of them are going to have a live edge or an uneven edge to make it look more natural on the one side. And I've also given them 2 coats of a sealer. Now sometimes when you put a sealer on, it might raise some of the little grain hairs. It might feel slightly rough. So yes, it has been sanded, but now I did include a little bit of sandpaper in your kit. We'll look at that in a minute. And then you can just do a light sand. So we'll talk about that, but that has been sanded and has some coats of a sealer on top of it. Then you're going to get, of course, your stencil like I just showed you. So you'll get your stencil, and then you're going to get, this is called transfer film, or they call it transfer tape. It's clear, and it just has this backing on it that has red lines, but when you peel that backing off, you will have a clear film underneath. And let's open up the actual little kit. So in this little kit, there is a list of all the things that you have out front. So we have a solid pine wood board, the stencil and transfer film, which I just showed you. Then we have a little piece of sandpaper, a sawtooth hook and small screws, outdoor varathane and a sponge brush, paint and sponge wedge, disposable apron, a weeding pin and a squeegee card, and instructions, which are folded up and put inside. And also you'll have access to these video instructions as well. And I just want to say thank you again for purchasing any of my kits or any of my products. I will be happy to help you if you email me at dabblediva@sasktel.net. I can answer your questions, or you can message me through Messenger on Facebook as well. So when you do get your kit, if I'm seeing you in person, for example, at a show, you will get your little container sealer, but then you can pick one of the colors of paints that I have. And so for the first show that I'm doing, I have black, I have white, I have dark gray, and I have brown. Now for this first kit that I'm putting out there, we're just going to be doing it on natural wood. I'm not pre-staining the wood or painting the background of the wood. So it's best to have the most contrast possible. White looks pretty, and anything that would be dark looks pretty. But if you go with a color that, say, yellow, and there is not enough contrast between the paint and the background, then it gets lost. So we're just going to stick with these simple colors, and you know, if you have your own colors at home, you're more than welcome to use those. So for today, because I want to have a good contrast for you to be able to see, I'm going to use black paint, and I don't need my sealer just yet, but this is an outdoor varathane, so you really only need it if you're putting it outside. It is optional if you want to put it inside, and it is a matte finish, but I'm going to put that aside right now. And we're going to take a look at what is in the actual little bag. And as I mentioned them on the front, we have a set of instructions, which I'll basically be following here in the video. And there's a little disposable apron that you're welcome to use. This is an adult size. This is basically a blank credit card, and it's our squeegee. So we'll talk more about that. And this is a weeding pin. So when you're taking out the areas that you want to paint, you're going to take out those little cut areas that you see the white underneath. You'll use your weeding pin for that. And then our little piece of sandpaper. And then we also have, this is an applicator wedge. And then we have our little sponge. This is for putting on our sealer. And then a little hook. Okay, so some of those we don't need right off the bat, so I'm just going to set all those ones, everything here aside, and we're going to start with our sandpaper. Okay, so for the sandpaper, you're going to pick the best side. You don't need to sand both sides. Now, some of the boards, of course, will have some natural little, we're not going to call them flaws because they're not flaws in nature, but natural little elements that you may find harder to paint on top of or raised. This one is fine. It's off to the side. Most stencils won't go that far over, so it's totally up to you, but you can pick whichever side you want. Now, with this particular thing that we're doing, because we're not painting the background, you're also going to want to remember you're going to see your wood grain in the back, so consider picking the nicer side with the wood grain that you like. It's completely up to you. And when you sand, you're going to sand very lightly, like I mean very, very lightly. And the reason is because when I put the sealer on, the sealer is water-based, and so it causes some of the grains or the hairs in the wood to lift a little bit. So by giving it a little light sanding in a circular motion, there we go. That's actually quite nice. And then we're going to take a damp cloth, and this is just actually a damp wet wipe, and I'm going to just brush or take off any of the sanding dust that remains. All right, so essentially we're done with our sandpaper. And again, you don't have to do the back. If you choose to do the sides, you can. But remember, if you do sand too hard, you will take off that coat of sealer. And the sealer is nice. It helps you have a smoother surface to paint on. It stops your paint from getting absorbed into the grains and then sometimes bleeding out a little bit. So it's actually nice to make sure that you have that coat of sealer. Okay, now we are going to assume that you have a stencil that has not been weeded yet. So if your stencil has already been weeded, you can just skip this part. So what you will take out is your little weeding pin. And I'm just going to use this tape to tape down my stencil so it doesn't keep curling up on me. And you're going to take your little weeding pin and you're just going to catch the edge of the letter or whatever it is that you're weeding out. You You're going to catch the edge of your letter or whatever it is that you're weeding out, and you're going to just peel it off like so. And you will do that for your entire stencil. So I'm going to leave you here, and I'm going to finish weeding this out, and then I will pop back on when it's done, and we'll continue with the next part. Hey, happy painters. We are back, and we are going to skip on to number 3. We just finished number 2 and sanding. Now we're going to attach that clear transfer film to the blue stencil. So I had mentioned that I was going to go and do this, the weeding, which means taking out the blue film that's in the areas where you want the paint to be. So anything now that is white is where the paint is going to go. If you see these little tiny letters, there was actually a little bits of stencil that was in the loops of the P or the loops of the Y. And they were so tiny that I knew if I left them on there, they would just start falling off. So I just opted to take them out, and it still looks great. And at the very end, if you decide you want to take a little tiny brush and paint in little bits here and there, that's up to you, but I think it looks great just as it is. So the last thing I want to mention is that your stencil probably has a white edge around it. You're going to trim that off. And then we're going to have a stencil that should be fairly close to the size of your board. Now, before we do anything with the board though, we have to put on our transfer film. So our transfer film is this stuff. So it has a white backing, and it has the red grid lines on it. So what you're going to do, now this, if you're following along with your written instructions, this is step 3. And we are going to start from one end, and we're actually just going to peel off a little bit of the white film, of the white backing. So I'm only going to go back a couple inches, and I'm going to just cut that off. Now there are different ways to do this. Very, very sticky film. It's brand new, very good quality, so it's quite sticky. Okay. So now what I have is, I have a piece that should be about the same size as my stencil itself. So just to make things easier, I'm going to put a little bit of tape to hold my stencil down, because mine's been curled up. Yours might be just fine because it's been laying flat on the board in the packaging. So just a little bit to tack down the edges there is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down on top of the stencil. And I'm going to make sure that this sticky part does not stick just yet. So it is, you have to make sure that it covers all the lettering. Oh, let's press it out a little bit. Just going to work that little bubble out to the side. That happens every now and again, so you don't really have to worry too much about it. The bubbles and stuff at this stage are not super important, because this is just basically a transfer film that's going to allow us to put the stencil onto our board, and that's where we're going to make sure we don't have wrinkles or bubbles. So I'm going to lay this on. I'm going to make sure that I have all of my lettering covered. Oh, here I do not, so I'm going to go over it a little bit. So this particular film was a spare one. It's slightly shorter than the actual stencil. I'll show you what I mean. See, over here it's coming off a little bit, and over here a little bit, and that's fine. But yours should be the full length. So what you do now that you have it in place, you've stuck down this side. So now you can peel off the rest of the backing, like so. And as you're peeling it slowly, you're going to just run your hand like this, pressing it down. You don't have to press too hard, just so that it sticks. And there you go. So I actually use these often if I'm painting. I use it as my paint palette, so something to put my paint on. So I actually save these. It's up to you if you need to save it, but we're going to set that aside. Now we're going to take our plastic squeegee, and we're going to do like the sun's rays, right? So the sun's rays kind of go like this. So you're going to start from the middle and then squeegee out. And I'm pressing down as I squeegee. And if you see a part, like that part was lifted up, I don't know if you can see it. There's a little part here, it's probably hard to see, but I can just sort of work that little bubble to the edge, and it kind of pops itself off the edge. You don't have to worry, like I said, about bubbles too much at this point. But what you want to make sure is that your transfer film is stuck well to your stencil. Okay, so we're just going to get these little bubbles out like so, and that looks really good. So all of this is in preparation to get it onto our actual board. So that takes us through step 3, and then we're going to take a look at step 4. So that's where we're going to transfer our blue stencil to our board. So the one thing that is not included in your kit that you will need is going to be a piece of tape. You can use any tape. I like to use the tape that the painter's tape, the green stuff, but it doesn't really matter what you use. And you're going to center it. And like I said, this is kind of a sample piece, so the board is a little bit shorter than I would like it to be, but that's okay. So my stencil's hanging off here, which is just fine with me. Yours should fit quite well. And then we're going to place that tape in the middle, and we're going to make sure we're nice and straight. We have it exactly where we want it. And then we're going to tuck the tape around this side and around this side. So there we go. So that brings us partway through step 4. Now we want to get the stencil onto the board. So we're going to, I start on my left side, and you're going to have to separate a little white backing from the blue stencil. Now, once you have that separated, what I like to do is I'm going to hold the stencil down flat, and I'm going to slowly, and I'm going to peel like this. You notice I'm pressing, don't just rip it and pull it up. You're going to hold it down and you're going to peel it slowly, because some of those little blue bits might stick to your stencil or to your backing. And we want to make sure that if they do, that we, let's say it was the inside of this letter E, maybe it's stuck here. I can take my little pin, weeding pin that I gave you, and I can pick it off and I can stick it back onto the blue stencil where it belongs. So our backing here should be completely white. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut close to where that tape was. So the whole purpose of this is to hold our stencil in place while we're trying to put it on. Some people just rip the whole backing off and then try and center it and flatten it. I've found much more success this way, but whichever way you know that you're comfortable with is definitely the way that you would like to go. So I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to push to the end, and then I'm going to, now I'm kind of going lightly at first, and then once I have it laid down pretty well, I can go harder with my tool here, and we call this burnishing. So you're going to then go fairly hard. And then I have to do something similar to the other side. I have to get that backing off, so I'm going to remove this tape. And then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm very carefully going to peel. Now, because this other side has already been peeled, I can take my either my my tool here, my card, or squeegee, sorry, and I can push, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just pushing along the way as I slowly pull this. Or option number 2 is to do what you did on the other side. So you can peel back, and sometimes I only peel back part way and then I'll push it down like you're steamrolling it. And then again making sure that no little blue pieces stick to my backing. It turned out well. And then I'm going to smooth it out. And there, it looks great. So then I'm taking my my little tool here and I'm going to burnish it. And that's just basically applying some pressure. Now be careful. This one here, oh, there's a little piece of tape there, but sometimes you might get a little something stuck underneath, and then when you go to burnish, it hooks it. So let's say there's a little pebble or I don't know, piece of sand or something, and you hook it, and then you actually end up by puncturing your stencil or scraping it. So just be careful that there's nothing caught underneath your stencil when doing this. And just do a really good job. So that brings us to the end of step 4 if you're following along, and we're going to move over now to step 5. Now step 5, we're going to remove the film, so our blue stencil is now attached to the board. So taking, I'm going to work from my left to my right. Now this is a really good quality, and it's a new sheet of transfer film, and I say that because I often use my transfer film over multiple times, and if you want to do that, you can just re-stick it to your backing paper and you can reuse it for other projects or whatever the case may be. But my point is that it could be quite sticky, so it may actually lift off some of your stencil as you go along. So I'm going to hold my end of my stencil here, and then I'm going to pull it gently. Now the trick again is never pull straight up. You can pull at an angle, but I prefer to pull quite flat. So I'm going to move this sideways so it's comfortable. And my hand is pretty much right flat. My knuckles are on the board and I'm pulling slowly. Now let's say a piece of it starts sticking to your transfer film. Then you have to stop. And then you would have to push this back down again. So let's say it was this little tip or the inside of the A sticking. Then I would rub it down really good, or I would burnish it with the squeegee tool. And then I would do it again, and hopefully it will stick. You have to make sure that if it starts to peel and starts getting stuck on your clear film, you have to stop and deal with it, or else you're going to just rip it right up all the way through. So I'm going slow, and sometimes when you're going slow, you can maybe go wiggle side to side. If people find that sometimes helps as well. This is coming off really well. So again, the reason it's sticking so nicely is because I do have 2 coats of sealer already on your board. So while I'm doing this, I'll just talk about the background. So I made it so that this is a simple, successful project. We did not paint the background of the board. You are welcome to paint the background of your board, or you're welcome to stain it. My suggestion is you do it and you give it a day to dry, or a good period of time to dry. Because sometimes if you do not, then when you lift off your stencil, you pull off your background color. Okay. There we go. So I'm just wiggling it off, and voila, we are done step 4. I'm just going to put that aside, and like I said, this is reusable, and so I'm going to put the backing on it again, and I can use it over and over again. Okay. All right, and I'll put the other piece on later, but you get the idea. Okay, these are from behind the blue stencil, and again, I love using these little wax. It's very sturdy paper, and it's got like a shiny finish, but I use it to put paints on when I'm painting, and then I can just chuck this away. So just the same thing as using a paper plate or whatever, but it's a free thing. I mean, you've got it anyways. Okay, so now this is beautifully done. I do have this little area where it looks like something got stuck under my stencil. So I'm gonna leave that. But other than that, it looks really good. And you can take your hand, well, it lifted up a little bit there, so I'm just going to rub it with my hand. So when I do this, it kind of warms up the stencil a little bit, and sometimes it sort of stretches it out, which is a good thing because you want it to sort of stretch and then form and lay flat where you want it to be. So I'm gonna go around my letters with my fingers just to make sure the seal between the letter and the stencil here, like this part here, is nicely attached, because that's where the paint can kind of seep into, right? Okay, and you can also do this with your squeegee tool, but I find my fingers are softer and sometimes squeegee tool will hook and will tear. So we want to keep the stencil in as good of condition as we can. So I'm just going careful not to roll any of these little fine edges, and I think we're good. Now for the fun part, we get to do some painting. Okay, so like I said, we can use this, and I'm going to actually take, this is the back of that blue stencil, and I'm just going to tuck it down there for a moment. And now we're going to use this sponge, and we're going to use the paint. Of course, you have plenty of paint, you'll have lots left over, but what I want to kind of get through to you is do not overdo it, because if you put too much paint on, it creates its own thick layer, and then that layer can attach to your stencil. Then when you go to peel that off, the stencil actually pulls off your layer of paint. So what I like to do is I'll dip my paint, my little foam sponge into there, and I'm going to just dab a little bit off to get all the chunky stuff off. Now if you're doing white, you might have to do like maybe 3 coats, maybe even 4. It depends on how you apply it. But with black, I might get away with, I probably won't get away with 1. I'll probably have to do 2 coats. And I'm just going to go straight up and down like that. And I want to, I can kind of go off to the side like this a little bit to try and get in between the little lip where the stencil is meeting the wood. And then the same thing. So I'm going to pick up my paint, but if I put that big gob of paint on there, it's going to probably sneak its way underneath the stencil. So I'm just going to dab it off. And again, I'm just going in a light, so I'm not pressing really hard where the sponge bends like this. It's just a very light dab. And I'm gonna keep dabbing away until that step is all done. If you're worried about getting paint on here, then you can just tape that off. So I'm just gonna go back with the tape that I had earlier and, you know, protect it. But because the one thing is you know, if you get paint down there, you can try and wipe it off with a wet cloth, but it may end up getting into your grains. So we're just going to tape that off. Show you what I mean. The more cleanly prepped you are, the nicer your finished product is likely going to end up, because sometimes we can easily get little fingerprints on the edge of our boards. Been there, done that lots of times. There we go. So I'm just going to keep at this, and you can pause the video here, and then when you're all done, you can come back. So you can see actually that the black is covering fairly well, but I'm still going to do 2 coats. But you also notice that I'm not squishing I'm not twisting at all. I can go in different directions, but I'm not actually twisting right on the board itself, because it'll push the paint underneath the stencil. And I am going to do 2 coats, but 2 light coats. Heavier is not better here, so 2 light coats. Okay, you go ahead, finish that up, and you can press play when you're ready again for the next step. Okay, we're back. And I have done 2 light coats of black onto my stencil, and it is pretty dry to the touch. I made sure I got nicely into all the little areas. I don't really see any wood grain here at all, between my stencil and my black paint. So now I'm going to peel this off, and again, as always, don't just rip it off by lifting straight up. So you're going to peel back slowly, and you're going to hold the stencil flat to the board. Now it's going to peel off in little pieces. And you can use your weed tool here that I gave you, that little pin, to get into the areas if you like. Now, because I didn't put too much paint on, I have a nice smooth finish. If you do put too much paint on, as I said, sometimes it clumps, it doesn't dry properly. Then when you're peeling off, you start peeling away a bunch of your paint. And holding it flat until I get everything peeled right off. This part is the most satisfying. I really like the natural wood finish. It is nice to paint the backgrounds as well, but to me this just goes so well with that nice little live edge that we have here. And so this takes a few moments. Okay, I'll stop this bigger part right now, and I'll just show you how I get into the small areas, so you don't have to sit and watch me do this big part. Okay, oh, I put my little weeding tool back. 1 second here. Okay. Oh, come on. It's really stuck. All right. So I'm going to, so in the smaller areas, when you're picking, if you just jab straight in, you're going to leave dip marks or divot marks in your board. So what I would suggest you do is you're just going to try and carefully hook it from the side, but don't scratch your paint. So it takes a moment to just be gentle and try and hook it without scratching your paint. Okay. And that's what you're gonna do. So you go ahead and do that. I will finish up and then we'll continue to the last step. And we are here to start wrapping it all up. So the next thing you're going to do, now you have to remember this has to have dried. So this black paint is very, very dry. And you're going to now do a coat of the outdoor Varathane. So that is optional. It does make it have a nicer finish if you want to give it a wipe, you know, a damp cloth and stuff when you're cleaning it. It won't smear, but it just has a nicer, smooth finish. And if you put it outside, it has UV protection in it. So the sun is not going to fade it out like a lot of things will get faded without any kind of UV protection. So the key to doing this is when you dip it into dip your brush in, you only want to have the sealer on the end, and you're going to very lightly, you're not going to go over it and over it again and again, because you may wet and reactivate your paint. Again, depending on how long it's been since it's been sitting. I actually only left my paint sit for about half an hour after I removed the stencil, just to make sure it was dry. You can give it a blast with a hot, or like a blow dryer if you want. That would also be a good idea. But again, just make sure that you're not going over and over and over it. And you want to make sure that you get all the parts. So you can kind of move it around a little bit and see. This is a matte finish sealer, so it won't dry super shiny. Okay, so that's it for there. I don't want to keep going over it. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now, if this is going outside, you will also want to do your edges, and if there's enough of the Varathane for you, you can do the back. So you can do 2 coats on the front if you want, but I would recommend first you do all the sides, And then what's left, you could do another coat on the front if you want to. But as long as you get a good coat, you'll be fine. But see, it's starting to smear a little bit there. I didn't leave it dry quite long enough. So I'm going to stop. I don't know if you guys can see that, where it's starting to, the black is starting to bleed a little bit. And that's my own fault for just trying to rush it for the purpose of the video. Okay, so right there. Alrighty, and then while that's drying, of course, I can do all the other edges.